Did you know that 3D modeling in CAD is a competitive sport? Is in head-to-head, creating geometry against the clock. Today, I'll show you why it's awesome and how you can benefit by getting involved even if you don't compete. "3D CAD esports. What a time to be alive." And you might be thinking that you have zero interest, but I'm here to convince you that there are various levels of engagement and each can help you improve as a maker. Firstly, let's answer the question, what is the gamification of CAD? Well, that is the term used by the creators of the competitive SpeakCAD, tootalltoby.com. And this site doesn't have any type of about page to understand the general concept, so I'll do my best to explain. Firstly, Too Tall Toby is a person, and we can see him if we go to Too Tall Toby's YouTube channel. He's known as an expert CAD user and is a creator and host of all of the content on the website and YouTube channel. The first thing to understand is that there's levels to this, and at its peak, it's all about the competitive tournaments. At the moment, there's two tournaments, the Spring Championships as well as the upcoming World Championships. These tournaments are arranged in a knockout style, kind of like NCAA Sweet 16. There might be variation for each tournament, but typically we have a best-of matchup rather than a single head-to-head for the winner to win and proceed. And yes, the winners, thanks to sponsors, do receive prizes for their victory. And again, this can vary from tournament to tournament, but typical would be a combination of a cash prize and a license for CAD software. The presentation of all of this, for me, is quite novel. We find out a little bit about each competitor, and we see their path through the tournament to date. Here's how each round goes. We have a countdown which will initiate a timer, and once that starts, a technical drawing will be put up on screen for the competitors to screenshot, and this is the first time that they'll be seeing it. Within seconds, they have to analyze the geometry and come up with a plan on how to model it. The competitors then commence their modeling, executing whatever plan they've come up with, and we can see that each of them will be sharing their screen. And on top of that, to help the viewer, the overlay contains information like the person's name, the CAD package they're using, where they're from, commentary from Toby, and a live feed from the YouTube chat. As the match progresses, the 3D models from each competitor will be coming together and they'll be getting closer to submit their answer, and this is one of my favorite parts. If you imagine a competitor has finished a complicated object, it's not really practical to go through and check the dimensions one by one to see if they're accurate. If that was the case, judging would be slow and tedious. The solution to this, in my opinion, is very clever. The answer the competitors submit is the mass of their part, and obviously they're going to need to model it accurately for this derived value to be correct. Each part being modeled will have a specified material and density, so when a user thinks they're done, they can use the CAD to calculate the mass from the geometry, and once they have it, they'll submit their answer right into the YouTube live chat. Each part will have a tolerance, allowing for some sort of tiny error in the modeling, and in the case that something more significant has been overlooked, competitors are allowed one wrong answer, meaning they have a chance to fix their geometry and resubmit before they're ineligible for victory. A few more details. You can use any CAD program you want as long as you can model the parts you need and it can calculate the mass. Anyone can enter for free by doing a practice exercise and submitting their time with video verification to the leaderboard. And there are different tier models that will be selected at random. For instance, the simplest will be tier 1 and very basic. That's good for practice, but in tournaments, the tier will be much higher and have much more complicated parts. If you want to compete, there's nothing to stop you doing it right now. But for everyone else, here's some other levels of engagement. I've broken this down into 4 levels of engagement. The first of which is passive, and that you just spectate. On the Too Tall Toby YouTube channel, all of the competition phases are live streamed in full. So subscribing is probably a good way to know when they're about to start. However, in the regular video section, we also have some clips that are edited highlights of particular matchups that are exciting. And if you're skeptical about how entertaining they can be, let me summarize this one. This particular match was a deciding one to see who would make the final of this tournament. While it was being communicated that Amance uses Chromecast with Onshape, he posted in the chat that he was having technical difficulties and needed to restart and rejoin. Others in the chat soon pointed this out, but unfortunately Toby completely missed it and started the match. A few seconds later, the competitors were presented with this tier 6 part that we saw earlier. This looked like an apt challenge, but the problem was only Dom and not Amance was connected and competing. Soon after, Toby realised this and selected a new drawing for a rematch to make sure everything was fair. The new match was started and the drawing was revealed to be Tier 7, even harder than the last one. When Toby revealed the competitors' streams, it was clear that something was very wrong for Amance. In all the confusion, he had started creating the original drawing instead of the new one. And worse still, he didn't realise there was a problem until more than 3 minutes into the match, by which time Dom already had a big head start. 5.5 minutes in, there was still a huge gap between the two models, and fast forward to 8.5 minutes in, things didn't look much better, and the result looked like a foregone conclusion. But a few minutes later, it seemed like a comeback could really be on the cards. Dom was bogged down in some details, and Amance all of a sudden was starting to have a model resembling the preview in the centre of the screen. Just as the clock was passing 17 minutes, Amance submitted their answer, 5,065 grams. It turned out that in the rush, Amance had made a small error, but thanks to the 5-gram tolerance, Amance's model was accurate enough to sneak in by less than half a gram. An unlikely but tremendous comeback had been completed. So spectating can be surprisingly entertaining, but I would consider the next level for those learning, and specifically I mean people more or less starting out with learning CAD. Let me take a second to plug my own playlist called 3D Design for 3D Printing that uses Onshape as the CAD. It's pretty long now and covers a range of different things, but it might not be the best solution for you. So it's worth noting that Toby has a playlist of straight out CAD tutorials. Most of the early ones are on SolidWorks, but more recently there's been a heavier focus on Onshape, and there's even an Libre tutorial as well for beginners. There's plenty of free CAD tutorials around the internet, and I'm happy to share another option. So a small amount of resources there for those starting out, but where I think there's real value is for those who are refining their skills that already know CAD and want to get better. Ideally, the best thing you can do in this situation is have a real world problem and then design something in CAD to be 3D printed or made another way to solve it. Nothing really beats real life in terms of feedback and satisfaction from a finished product. But sometimes we still want to extend our CAD skills but don't have a situation like this arising. So if we come to the practice model page, we can see there's a range of training exercises ranging from Tier 1 up to as high as Tier 6. Now a caveat here for many people is that to access these you will need to create a free account, and that means handing over your phone number for SMS 2-factor authentication. I haven't received any spam calls since doing this, but nonetheless I know this is a deal breaker for some, so I'm going to show some alternatives. But first, once you are logged in, you can click on any of these practice exercises, scroll down and then click here to begin. When we click Reveal Drawing, a timer will start for those that want to do this against the clock and treat it as a competition. Of course that's entirely optional. You can just reveal the drawing and then take as much time as you want to model it. And if this is all you want to do, on this page alone there are a lot of exercises, you'll get a lot of practice and you should improve quite a bit. If you did optionally want to submit your answer and run against the clock, you will get some nice statistics afterwards, displayed on these graphs, showing where you fit in versus the fastest time, as well as average. And just below that, a little more detail about where you fit in on a standard distribution curve. On this first model, I was fine with the modeling, but then was caught out setting up my material with the matching density to that specified. Later in the video, I'll give you some tips to avoid this frustration and waste of time. Between all of these practice models, there's a good amount of variation, and it wasn't long until I found one where there was parts where I needed to brush up on my skills. For instance, ellipses. I very rarely use them, but they were critical to modeling this part in two distinct areas. While I was modeling, the clock was ticking and I started to get a little bit stressed, thinking I was wasting too much time planning my approach. So I was pleased once I submitted my results and found that I was closer to the fastest time than I was the average. But that doesn't mean there's not plenty of room for improvement, which I would get from completing all of these tasks. If you don't want to make an account, we still have other options. For instance, we can come to tournaments and click to pretend we want to qualify. On these pages, you'll have a few drawings that you can work from. There's also nothing to stop you from watching the previous matches, pausing the video and taking screenshots of those drawings. I guess the only catch is, if you're early in your CAD journey, these tend to be higher tiers and a little more difficult. So another great option is exploring the other videos on the YouTube page. For instance, there's a series every week called Model Monday, where a drawing will be provided and then potential solutions for how to model it. Typically these are things a little bit trickier, so you can think outside the box and perhaps learn something new. Toby normally uses SolidWorks, but I would argue that doesn't matter, because the vast majority of CAD programs follow an industry standard, so what you can do in one, you can easily do in another. Doing all of these practice models has some other benefits that will enhance your skills. Firstly, you'll learn different ways to construct a final product, kind of like those how to draw tutorials I remember as a kid that broke up animals into smaller, simpler parts. You can achieve this through your own experimentation, but also from watching the head-to-head matches. For instance, these two parts are absolutely identical in the end result, but on this blue one, the base is created first, the bottom is then cut out, the upper section is created only on one side, before this is mirrored to the other side and the fillets are applied. However, this grey one is a little bit different. On this one I modelled only one side of the base and included the fillets at the start, then applied the cutout as before, created the upper section, before mirroring the entire part to make it symmetrical. There's always more than one way to solve a problem, and it's healthy to consider approaches outside your first instinct. Another benefit is you're going to get a lot better at reading these engineering drawings. I think for anyone who's modelled in parametric CAD, you'll instantly understand the gist of them. There may be some things that you don't use yourself, like center lines shown here in green, and perhaps these dashed hidden detail lines. I think this drawing is great to learn from, as it also has a section view through AA. That's showing what the part looks like if it was cut in half at that point. And we also have a detail view here, expanded to give enough space to show these dimensions. One other advantage is you'll probably learn some new tools in your CAD package of choice. For instance, these holes around the outside, normally I would have an extrusion through and then apply this as a chamfer. But the way this was dimensioned on the drawing made this quite difficult. Therefore, I was forced to learn to use the hole tool with the countersink feature so I could input the exact dimensions. And here's another example of me learning a new tool. Normally for this boss on the outside, I would do it on one side and then mirror over to the other side. But I noticed in the competition that people would use a single extrusion for both ends and then be left with this bulge unwanted underneath. Enter Delete Face, a tool I have literally never used before. And this is an easy way to quickly remove unwanted geometry. I guess it rings true that practice does make perfect, and any practical participation with these exercises will provide that. Let's finish up with a few tips in case you actually want to compete. First and foremost, you're going to need two screens, or at least a screen and something like a phone. It's just too inefficient to keep switching back and forth between your CAD and the drawing that you're following. Remember when I talked about wasting time after the model was done, assigning the right material and density? Well, all of the exercises and tournaments use materials that might have a different density to those inbuilt in your CAD package, so we want to set them up first. The first thing you should do is increase the precision for the mass in your CAD package so you don't have any rounding errors take you outside the tolerance. After that, you want to set up a custom material library with only the materials you need, and I've linked this guide that I use to do so in Onshape. I've linked my document publicly below so you don't have to jump through as many hoops. You can then make a copy and in the preferences, add it so it's accessible for when you're competing and time is of the essence. Before you start any timed runs, create any basic shape and then assign a material to it. You can then click the plus and add the custom library. This will make it part of the overall document, which means any part studios you create will have quick access to it and only the materials that you need. So when the timer is running, it should be extremely fast to select what you need and get that mesh measurement to input. My other tip is to read the rules carefully. For instance, you can submit times over and over and only your fastest time will be the one that counts. So again, practice makes perfect and you can shave off precious seconds as you refine your technique. Just remember to screen record each time so you will be eligible. Look, I find 3D modeling quite an enjoyable activity, just like people enjoy reading books or solving Sudokus. So I'm glad to spread the word on competitive CAD, and I hope I've convinced you that your future projects might be improved from some sort of participation. Let me know down below in the comment section if you're going to have a closer look. Thank you so much for watching, and until next time, happy competitive 3D modeling. G'day, it's Michael again. If you liked the video, then please click like. If you want to see more content like this in future, click subscribe and make sure you click on the bell to receive every notification. If you really want to support the channel and see exclusive content, become a patron. Visit my Patreon page. See you next time.